Me and him, we've been friends since high school, so we can talk without holding back. I'm pretty straightforward, and I told him, I can't claim that I'm on some spiritual journey. Even now, I can't say I'm practicing. You know why? Because I can't even manage the first thing, treating everyone equally. It's tough. Hey, everyone, take a second to think about yourselves. In our daily dealings with people, we come across folks who aren't just a little dumb, but also morally messed up. Sometimes when I think about them, I can't help but have a bit of contempt, you know? But the moment that thought pops up, I know I'm in the wrong. It's a real challenge, way harder than giving up booze or cigarettes. Quitting those might even have some practical motives, right? It's about living longer. So, when Zen Buddhism brought up the idea of equality among all beings, for the history of Chinese thought, it was seriously mind-blowing. Why is there equality among everyone? Where does it come from? It's because we all have Buddha nature. There was this student who asked his teacher because he hadn't reached enlightenment yet. When you become a monk, you have to take the 3 vows, right? Taking refuge in the Buddha, taking refuge in the Dharma, taking refuge in the Sangha. So, one day, he couldn't hold back and asked his teacher, "We're supposed to take refuge in the Buddha. Master, can you tell me where exactly the Buddha is?" The teacher responded like this, "The one who listens to you talking about the teachings right in front of you is the Buddha." With just that one sentence, the student got it. All beings are Buddhas. All beings are potentially Buddhas who haven't awakened, and Buddhas are beings who have awakened. So, strictly speaking, Buddhism isn't a religion. It's atheistic. No gods. Shakyamuni Buddha was just an ordinary person. We use the Chinese word fo, Buddha, to translate the Sanskrit term bodhisattva. So, what does bodhisattva actually mean? It means someone who's awakened. Every person has Buddha nature, which is as vast as your universe. It's just that we haven't realized it yet. What do we call this state of not realizing? Regular folks. When we're lost in our everyday thoughts, we're just regular folks, but when we have moments of enlightenment, we become Buddha. That's why it's important never to underestimate anyone. If someone commits sins that are not only morally wrong but also against the law, they'll be put in prison to protect society. Even when facing such a person, we shouldn't look down on them because their Buddha nature is still there. Once they awaken, they become Buddha. There is a saying among the common people in China. What is it? Put down the butcher's knife, and become a Buddha on the spot. There is no person in the world who is without hope because they possess Buddha nature within them. This is remarkable. The heart-mind teachings of Zen Buddhism proclaim that our original mind is Buddha, known as the heart is the Buddha. It highlights an extremely important realm that was not emphasized in previous Chinese philosophies, the equality of all sentient beings. People have all sorts of differences. They come from different backgrounds, have different levels of intelligence, some are smart while others may not be, and there are differences in personalities and genders. But none of these differences give anyone the right to belittle another person because deep down, everyone has inner potential. Each person should embrace their uniqueness and take charge of their own lives. That's what Zen Buddhism teaches us. When people approached Wang to learn about his teachings, he told them, "I can't save you or enlighten you. Each person has to find their own way to enlighten, and I can only offer inspiration. We, ordinary folks, need the guidance of wise and virtuous individuals with greater knowledge to show us the way. But being inspired by others doesn't mean they can enlighten us. We still have to enlighten ourselves, but their inspiration can help us in that journey." As I mentioned earlier, the Song and Ming dynasties marked the second peak of Chinese philosophy. The first peak was during the pre-Qin period, known as the 100 Schools of Thought, and then came the second peak in the Song and Ming dynasties, 10th to 17th century CE. This era came about because there was a fundamental problem that needed solving. The new Confucianism of the Song and Ming dynasties split into two schools, Chinese Neo-Confucianism and Wang Neo-Confucianism. Even though these two schools had their differences, they shared a common goal. And what was that? To kick out the monsters from the hearts of the Chinese people. Yangming said, "It is easy to defeat bandits in the mountains, but it is difficult to catch the thief within one's own heart." How can Chinese people establish their independent personality? What does it mean to have an independent personality? It refers to being a moral and self-conscious individual, breaking free from the culture of master and servant. Later, Wang Yangming stated, "Every one of us Chinese, whether a humble laborer or a street vendor, should possess a spirit of self-improvement and be heroic in asserting our own ideas. The social status of a person may vary, whether you are a humble laborer or a street vendor, but it does not prevent us from becoming great heroes." It means having a spirit of self-improvement and asserting oneself. This goal represents the common objective of the new Confucianism of the Song and Ming dynasties, to defeat the inner thief and break free from the culture of master and servant. It is a great enlightenment movement initiated by the Chinese people themselves. Zen Buddhism prepared the groundwork for this. We have a basis because Zen Buddhism tells us that everyone possesses Buddha nature. Each individual can rely on his own mind, known as the mind is Buddha. This is how we have the teachings of Lu Xiangshan and Wang Yangming school of the heart. So, here's the third question: what exactly is Wang Yangming school of the heart? Earlier, we talked about Mencius school of the heart, which was just the beginning. Then we delved into the school of the heart of Zen Buddhism, using all those fancy Buddhist terms. But now, let's check out the top-notch achievement of school of the heart in China, which is Wang Yangming school of the heart. The main concept in Wang Yangming school of the heart, like I mentioned before, is that heart is the truth. There's no real principle or truth that stands outside the heart. I gave you a quick rundown of this idea earlier in the morning too. These days, when we do stuff, we often rely on principles that go beyond just our own thoughts, right? Okay, let's see what it really means when we say, heart is the truth. The 4 books, which are Great Learning, Doctrine of the Mean, Analects, and Mencius, are like a set. The first one is Great Learning. For us Chinese folks who want to dive into philosophy, Great Learning is the book we gotta start with. It's like the door that leads us into the realm of virtue. Zhengzi, one of Confucius' top students, wrote this text. Now, there might be some debates about who actually wrote it among the historians, but hey, the authorship isn't that important. Originally, it was part of the Book of Rites, but later, during the Song dynasty, the Qing brothers, Cheng Yi and Cheng Hao, pulled out this specific section from the Book of Rites and made it its own independent book. After Great Learning, there's another book called Doctrine of the Mean, written by Zisi, a student of Zhengzi. Zisi was Confucius' grandson and Mencius' teacher, and he wrote Doctrine of the Mean. Alright, let's delve into Great Learning and talk about this book. Remember the first line? It goes like this: the way of great learning is to unwrap illustrious virtue, to be close to people, and never stopping at doing good. That's what we call the 3 guidelines. So, what's the deal with Great Learning? It's basically the study for adults. And what does it mean to study as an adult? Well, it's all about learning how to be a perfect person and standing out from the narrow-minded crowd. So, when do people usually start reading this book? According to Confucius, it's around 15 years old. Confucius himself said that he had a thirst for knowledge when he turned 15. But what exactly are they learning? It's all about aiming to become virtuous and wise, reaching the level of the wise sages. Before 15, it's called Shaozu, not great learning. So, what's Shao Shui all about? Is it like our modern-day primary school, middle school, and university? Nah, not really. In ancient times, Shao Shui was the education given to kids during their early years. They gradually learned how to read, do math, ride horses, play music, and they were also taught about manners, etiquette, and how to interact with others. That was Shao Shui. Once a person hits 15, they step into great learning, which is all about becoming a true gentleman. And that's when they start reading this book called Great Learning. Great learning is like the grown-up study stuff, and the first line talks about the 3 main principles, also known as the 3 guidelines, to unwrap illustrious virtue, being close to the people, and attaining the ultimate goodness. So, what's the deal with unwrap illustrious virtue? It's made up of 2 parts. The first, unwrap, is a verb. We actually have goodness within us, but sometimes we can't see it because it's hidden away. Bringing it out, inspiring it, and letting it show, that's what we call unwrap illustrious virtue. So, what exactly is illustrious virtue? Well, it's all about the virtue of the heart. And what does it means? In English, we call it virtue. Those who've studied English know that it refers to the unique quality of a thing. Everything has its own virtue. What's the virtue of our legs? Running and jumping. What about our hearts? Thinking and learning. And the virtue of our hearts is called illustrious virtue. It was always there, but it got obscured somehow. So, removing that obscurity and letting it shine again, that's what we mean by unwrap illustrious virtue. So, how do we actually live out unwrap illustrious virtue? Here's the deal: by being there with others. The being close to the people refers to the lives of everyday people. It's not about locking ourselves away in a room, lost in our own thoughts. That's not what unwrap illustrious virtue is about. The way to embrace unwrap illustrious virtue is by getting out there, observing, and experiencing how people live. Why? Because that's where we'll find the true essence of life and the principles that guide us. They reside within the lives of the people. By the time you're 15, you should have a good understanding of how regular folks live their lives, the everyday stuff that holds profound wisdom. We call this being close to the people. And then, the ultimate aim is to achieve the highest goodness. This is how Yangming sees the ultimate goodness. It's about reaching the pinnacle of our hearts, where they resonate perfectly with the principles of nature. It's like having a pure heart that's completely in sync with the highest standards set by heaven. And what does utmost mean? It's like the ultimate benchmark or standard. Once we truly understand who we are at our core and grasp the essence of being morally upright, we find ourselves in a state of clarity and goodness known as unwrap illustrious virtue. And how do we cultivate this unwrap illustrious virtue? By getting close to the people, by understanding their lives. And what does understanding their lives lead us to? It leads us to align our hearts with the principles of the truth. In this state, everything we think about follows the standards set by our universe, free from personal desires and biases. It means cleansing ourselves of any prejudices or selfish desires. This state is what we call being in complete harmony with the highest principles of the universe. And what's the name we give to this state? The ultimate goodness. So, these are the 3 key principles of the Great Learning. Now, let's dive into the 8 stages or progression. There are a total of 8 stages as we progress our personal development, exploring things to gain knowledge, being sincere and true in our intentions, developing personal integrity and nurturing harmonious family relationships, governing the country and working towards bringing peace to the world. These are the 8 stages.